I love the hustle, man. I be feeling like one of them ball playing, like Bird or Magic or something. But if I leave, the fans still gonna love me, man?
With the finale of House of the Dragon, everyone's going to be wondering, is House of the Dragon better than Game of Thrones? Well, it's really hard to compare them with Game of Thrones having so much content compared to House of the Dragon's 1 season, 10 episode season. Like, it's hard to say for sure. Personally, I really like the divisiveness of Game of Thrones. We had several different families, which for a lot of people, they didn't like that. It was hard to keep track of the Baratheons, the Lannisters, the Starks, the Freys, the Greyjoys. There's a lot of families to keep track of. Whereas in House of the Dragon, it's much more simple because you have one main family, the Targaryens. Those are the main families. And then you have a second family that's not as important, but also pretty important, the Valarians. But they're easier to keep track of because the Valarians are black. So, you don't ever forget who the Valarians are. They're the black family, the one black family in Westeros, sorry. So it's hard to compare that, but on a scope, I would say House of the Dragon has a much smaller scope. Whereas in Game of Thrones, I guess I might see it's hard because I might be thinking of overall Game of Thrones is about a war for the crown and the White Walkers, and the war for the crown doesn't develop until later seasons, and the White Walkers don't come for much longer either. So if we take just what we got in season 1, and that's what I'm trying to figure out, what happened all in season 1. So the last episode is the Green Council. So that's actually House of the Dragon. I meant to look up Game of Thrones. Season 1. Oh, season 1 also had 10 episodes, which is funny because the episode is called Fire and Blood, which is hilarious because that's what the book of this show, House of the Dragon, is based off of. It's based off of a book literally called Fire and Blood. It's crazy. But yeah, I'm about to pull this episode up and see what actually happened in this episode, season 1. So Ned has already died. Daenerys is here. Oh, this is the episode. Daenerys kills Khal Drogo. So Khal Drogo is still alive. Well, he was alive at least. So it ends with Daenerys getting her dragons, which in House of the Dragon, the dragons are literally everywhere. They're everywhere. So the dragons don't seem as, I don't want to say powerful as they did in Game of Thrones, because by the time we get to Game of Thrones, which is 200 years later, dragons are pretty much extinct. Like, they're gone. You're like, what happened to the dragons? Even now, they're not as popular as they were before. Like, whenever dragons give birth, even now, it's like a big deal. But by the time we get to Daenerys' time, there are no more dragons. Dragons are all gone after the Civil War. So it's really hard to say which show I prefer better. As far as characters go, I prefer Game of Thrones because they were more likable characters, I feel like. Whereas in House of the Dragons, the plot is good, the world is good, the lore is good, but the characters, they're just not likable. Like, you can pick every single character in this show and I don't like them, Princess Rhaenyra, okay, she was cool till she did Sir Kristen dirty. She also started that fight where the two men were trying to get her hand, and the little boy killed the older guy. That was really her fault because she was making fun of that little guy, and then the other guy made a joke at his expense, and obviously you can't fight the princess, but I can fight you, and so that was really her fault. There's Sir Christian, he was cool until, he got done dirty, yeah, he did, but still, at least you have your life. There's Queen Alicent now, my bad, although she used to be Princess Rhaenyra's best friend till she married her dad, which is a crazy convolution that just happens in the world of George R.R. Martin. Like, he does stuff like that. It's crazy. So there's Queen Alicent, which, based off of that transgression, it already makes me not want to like her, because how are you going to marry your best friend's dad? Like, that's crazy to me. But even after that, there's a couple misunderstandings, and now she just hates the princess, which, the princess isn't all that, but there's a misunderstanding, it sounds like. There's King Viserys, which he's probably, I hate to say it because he's such a loser as far as kings go, but he's probably my favorite character if I had to pick somebody. He really just wants to keep his family together. But if that was the case, he shouldn't have remarried and he shouldn't have had more kids. That's just it. That's all I'm saying. Like, if he was gonna make her his heir, which he didn't know that he was going to, he was up in the air about doing it. He's probably my favorite character. I also mess with Damon, even though he is just cold-blooded. Like, he's straight a murderer. Like, I'm not saying he's a good guy, but I mess with Damon. Like, a lot of people hate Damon. I mess with him. I mean, he did kill his last wife, so it's just hard to root for him overall, you know, because, like, he murdered his wife and she didn't do anything. Like, she didn't do anything. He just wanted a new wife. He wanted new land. He wanted more power. So he killed her, and I think that's kind of crazy, but this is Game of Thrones. We can go over to who else. Her husband, Laenor. Laenor was a wimp. I'm glad he got out of there. Like, I was not messing with Laenor. It was salty how they killed his boyfriend. I thought that was crazy. I did not expect that to happen. I thought we was going to have a nice little arrangement. I think it's crazy that they didn't have no kids. Like, I feel like that's crazy, especially since she can have kids. Like, but whatever. We can move on to the more characters. We can move on to the kids. So we have Jace. Jace is boring. We have his brother, Luke, Lucerys, Jace. I think it's both Jacaerys and Lucerys. Both of those guys are kind of boring. But to be fair, they're pretty young. But they do get another growth spurt in the second to last episode where they're much older than they were before. But prior to that, they're pretty boring. Then we have the royal kids. You know, we have Melena, we have Aegon, and then we have Aemon. Aemon was actually, I really messed with Aemon before then. Like, he seemed like he was just doing his duty, you know. But then he got a dragon, he got his eye cut off, and he just got a big old ego. At least he's always had that, and I just didn't recognize it beforehand. He was the only one of his siblings without a dragon. And you know what? It's just like, I don't mess with him now. Like, he's a jerk. Like, he's a jerk now. Like, even if he kills Luke and Jacaerys, like, even if they were to die, I just don't get it, because Aegon is the next in line. Like, he would have to kill his brother Aegon too. So it's like, you have to kill a lot of people to get thrown, buddy. You're third in line. And then Aegon was cool until it turned out that he was a predator. Like, dang, I was rooting for Aegon. I thought he was just under the stress of being the third in line, you know, like, you know. But Melena's pretty cool. I hope I'm saying her name right. The sister who plays with bugs. But, you know, she has the gift of prophecy, which is actually pretty powerful in Game of Thrones if you can actually understand prophecy, which almost no one can. So that's why prophecy is, like, the worst thing in Game of Thrones, because no one knows how to read prophecies. Like, it's really hard to read prophecies in Game of Thrones. But she's cool. I mean, those are really our main characters. We have the Clubfoot. He's messed up. That guy's messed up. I mean, he killed his father and his brother to be Lord. I'm like, jeez. And he said that he did it for the queen. So now he has the queen blackmailed. It's a nice little move. I'm not really rooting for him, though. We also have the Valerians. We had Corlys, which I liked Corlys. He was a prideful man. He really just wanted to put his family on the throne. And the Targaryens really just tore that family apart. I mean, Corlys had his own ambition, but really the Targaryens are the ones who got their daughter killed because she went and got the fire burned her up. And then the other brother, he died, but really he faked his own death. He died too, and they blamed the Targaryens. So it's like they lost both their kids to the Targaryens, like crazy. And now with the death of Vaemond, the Valerians are almost, like, you know, their name they're almost done for, because if the Valerian daughters, the cousins, marry the Targaryens will keep the last name, and then the Valerians will become Targaryens. And that'll basically be the end of the Valerians, basically, by name rights, you know, because Vaemond died. And I don't know if Vaemond had kids. If he did, technically they would be Valerians, but, you know, that's like one or two kids probably at the most, and, you know, they don't have any titles, you know, because, you know, Lucerys is going to take over the Driftwood throne, and then Lucerys is going to take over the Iron Throne. So there's not really any other thrones for the other hypothetical Valerians to have. So overall, I mean, there's just not a lot of characters to root for. I think Game of Thrones had much better characters. The world is the same. I liked how it felt like the world was more divided in Game of Thrones, where it felt like each one of the 7 kingdoms was distinct, and they had their own culture. You had the North, and then you had the South, but you also had the Iron Islands. You had wherever the Tullys are from. I forgot where they're from. I forgot the name of it. The Reach. I want to say it's the Reach. I just felt like everything was more distinct, whereas in House of the Dragon, even when we're in Essos, it does kind of feel like it's the same world, but whenever you were in Game of Thrones, everything felt more distinct. When you went to the north, it was snowing. When you were in the south, the sun was blazing. When you were in the Iron Islands, it was stormy. Whenever you were in the Reach, it was like really cloudy. Like each thing felt different. Whereas in House of the Dragon, we're mostly in King's Landing or Aegonport, Queen's Landing and Aegonport are the same thing. I meant to say Dragonstone. Like we're not really traveling around like we did before. We get some scenes in Essos, but not really too much. So I do like the environments and the characters better of Game of Thrones. The stakes. What are the stakes? In this show, the stakes are this line of succession. That's literally it. This line of succession. We need to keep our children alive. Princess Rhaenyra doesn't want her kids to be killed so that Queen Alicent's kids can become the leaders, and then Queen Alicent doesn't want her kids killed so that Princess Rhaenyra's kids don't have any contest for the throne. So it's just 2 mothers trying to protect their kids from getting killed from other mothers or other people because of a throne. And then in Game of Thrones, what's going on? In Game of Thrones, Robert Baratheon goes to the north, brings Ned Stark to the south because Jon Arryn was murdered because of a plot about some kids that are not actually Baratheon kids being actual Lannister kids. So that is also a succession thing. So both of these are succession plots, although they are different. I think the succession plot of bringing a man from the north who is an honorable man and he's out of his death, bringing him down to the south and to a snake pit is much more interesting than following people who have been in the snake pit their whole lives, which are the cast of the Targaryens in House of the Dragon. So I like the premise of Game of Thrones better. And I'm really just trying to compare the first season 1 to season 1. But it is really hard to be unbiased about it because Game of Thrones gets much better than season 1. It also gets much worse than season 1. So it's like, but overall, House of the Dragon, despite all of my nitpicks, I know we're 12 minutes into the video, despite all my nitpicks, House of the Dragon is a great show. I enjoy watching it every week. Every time a new episode comes out, I watch it that night or I watch it the next day typically. And I like the show. At first, the first couple episodes, you're like, it's more Westeros, but it doesn't feel like Game of Thrones. But episode 3 and 4, they really got much better. And from then on, it's just been improving and improving and improving. I think the intricacies of this show surpass season 1 of Game of Thrones. Like, they know what they're doing. This is technically the 9th season of Game of Thrones. They know what works. They know what doesn't work for the most part. And right now, they're probably just setting up the foundation. And I'm sure season 2 will be much better. But what are your thoughts? Do you think Game of Thrones is better or House of the Dragon? Let me know if you think they're better overall or season 1 versus season 1 like I was trying to do. With that said, I'll catch you guys next time. Peace. And if you want to see more content like this, definitely check out my channel. I have curated playlists, movies, video games, all kinds of stuff like that. This is my first Game of Thrones video, but if you guys like this video, I'll do more Game of Thrones content. And with that said, I'll catch you guys next time. Peace for real this time. Trilogy out.
I love the hustle, man. I be feeling like one of them ball playing, like Bird, Magic or something. But if I leave, the fans still gonna love me, man?